Hello and welcome to the Oklahoma history class, how to teach lies as facts. You're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, this is in Oklahoma and this isn't a history class, but maybe it is today. All right, class, now settle down. Welcome to today's lesson, History According to Oklahoma. Spoiler alert, it's kind of like history, but only if you ordered it from Temu or Wish.com. Apparently, Oklahoma has decided that when kids learn about the 2020 election, they're not just going to learn about voting, democracy, and the Constitution. Nope. They're going to learn about conspiracy theories. Yes, in the land of tornadoes, fried fair food, kids will now be taught to question the certified results of an election. Because, when you can't win in reality, the next best thing is to rewrite the textbooks. Stalin would be so proud. So here's the deal. Oklahoma is the first state in the United States to put straight up 2020 election conspiracy theories into their high school history curriculum. Students are literally told to identify discrepancies in the election results. Translation, find ghosts where there aren't any. Now some are asking, well, this is just another false news article. Well, I researched it to make sure I was right. And unfortunately, I was right. Multiple sources have put out that Oklahoma's decided to teach this to help their students learn critical thinking, to decipher between reality and fact. That is the same as a few years ago, some schools were talking about flat earth theory because it had become so ingrained in the online avenue. Teaching flat earth or teaching election denying, no matter which side you're on, is not exactly the best course of action, I believe. It's not teaching history, it's teaching fan fiction. Like if your English teacher handed you The Hobbit and said, now imagine if Frodo actually worked at Chick-fil-A, and let's call that history too. And the official reason, again, this is from the superintendent of schools, critical thinking. They want to teach their students critical thinking. Yeah, because nothing says critical thinking like planting conspiracy theories in teenagers, right? And calling it curriculum approved. So these kids are learning, they're going to go to college, and the college is going to tell them something else. And again, like I've talked about before, when you teach kids the wrong history, when they become older, they start spewing that wrong history. And it can lead to a lot of bad, negative, and horrifyingly bad things. So let's look at this as historical parallels, right? Because it's where it gets fun for me. Because history is full of governments messing with textbooks. This isn't new. Oklahoma's just joining the club. Club of we don't really like reality, so let's print our own version. Now, this is the one that most people think about. Nazi Germany. Textbooks were rewritten so kids grew up thinking Hitler was basically like Santa Claus, but with a mustache. In the Soviet Union, history books magically erased people who fell out of favor. They literally photoshopped groups of people out before there was Photoshop. Even in the Cold War, America's, like me, kids were given civic textbooks where basically the rah-rah democracy manuals were what we read. It left out, segregation, lynching, other important details. And now Oklahoma says, what if we did that, but dumber? What if we rewrote history, not decades later, 5 minutes after it happened? Let's go to a lovely classroom activity. Okay, pop quiz. I'm going to give you 2 questions. Let's see how you do. Question 1. If 5 states certify their election results, but your uncle on Facebook says it was rigged, who do you believe? A, the certifying officials, B, the courts, or C, your uncle on Facebook who has a bald eagle profile picture and his username is Patriot Warrior 1776. If you picked A or B, sorry, you're wrong. C, there you go. You're getting there. Now, question 2. Which one is more reliable? A, 60 failed court cases across the US. B, a YouTube video showing news articles from the AP and other certifiably accurate news channels. Or C, a YouTube video with a guy filming from the back of his truck telling you how the system is rigged, America. That's right, the guy in the truck. So here's the real damage, okay? Here's why this is a big deal. Jokes aside, this is dangerous because when you start teaching kids conspiracy theories as valid historical evidence, you're basically telling them facts are optional. It undermines democracy or undermines democracy. It normalizes misinformation and creates generations who think critical thinking means Googling it or ChatGPT or whatever else until you find the answer you already wanted. You can Google anything and find the right answer that you want. Just because it's the answer you want doesn't mean it's true. And here's the kicker. This isn't even the first time history has been weaponized in America. Remember that lost cause narrative after the Civil War? Textbooks in the South spent decades teaching that slavery wasn't the main issue. It was just about states' rights. That rewriting of history kept white supremacy alive over the centuries. Now we're seeing a version, the lost cause of Trump. Trump lost. You don't have to agree with it, but he lost in 2020. Now, there are a lot of wacky things that happened, and maybe not everything was perfect, but our system is set up that the results are the results and we move on. We don't attack the Capitol. We don't beat up on everybody. We don't yell and scream and throw things. If you were on that side, you've always promoted that you need to trust the results. You need to trust our Constitution. You need to trust the system. Because when the other side rioted and threw things and had a hard time with things, you told them to shut up and accept the results. But in 2020, for some reason, we couldn't do that. Certain Americans had a hard time accepting results as fact. And here's where my brain, the ADHD, anxiety, the whole thing, just breaks. Because I already have trouble trusting my own memory, right? I forget where I put my keys, what day it is, sometimes what room I'm in or why I'm in that room. And now Oklahoma is saying, hey, let's gaslight the entire generation about the past. Like, great, thanks, because I definitely needed one more reason to second guess my brain, right? In reality. It's like living in a group project with a guy who never does the work suddenly decides he's the editor of the final paper, except the paper is democracy. So what's the lesson? The category mistake here, or the lesson here, or what I see here, what the problem is here, is confusing history with political fan fiction. The political fan fiction we have been doing for a long time, not a long time, okay, it's been a while. I'd say ever since Bush and Gore. To go back, Bush versus Gore in 2000. George Bush II, not the first one, he ran against Vice President Al Gore. And the election was a toss-up. Comes to the state of Florida, and they're recounting and recounting and recounting. And there's these little pieces of paper called hanging chads, okay? And the election officials said, well, only certain votes count because they didn't push it correctly or it wasn't fully punched through. Weird rules. And that started people going, well, Al Gore actually won, not George Bush. And so they started denying the election. And the Republican side, which is what George Bush was on when he became president, kept telling the Democrats, suck it up, you lost, deal with it. And they didn't. They didn't want to deal with it. And then 9/11 happened, and kind of people started forgetting about it, right? They forgot about it because, well, the world was at war. And that's usually what happens. Since then, a lot of the elections have been questioned, from voter integrity to who's allowed to vote, to who's not allowed to vote, to how many votes are counted compared to how many people live there. And if you think about it, this happened for JFK in the 60s. This has happened a lot, but with the increase of social media and the internet, it's happening more because more people have a voice to get on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or Facebook and say what they think happened because some guy told them at a gas station, and that type of news is dangerous. And that's, I think, the point. History is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's brutal. But it's real. And the second you replace it with alternative facts, you're not teaching kids to think critically. You're teaching them to live in denial. Oklahoma might think it's preparing students for the future. But really, it's just preparing them to be the guy in every group chat who says, actually, the election was stolen. And no one wants to sit with that guy at lunch. So I have a few more exercises that I want you to try today, just for giggles. All right, class, now think about this. Have you ever played a game of Monopoly? I think almost all of us have, or something like Monopoly or Sorry or Skippo or Uno or Phase 10, anything with other people, okay, not by yourself, and you lost. And you said, wow, no, you changed the rules. The rules are fake. This isn't how we play. This is wrong. Your version's the wrong version. That's what Oklahoma's doing, okay? Or can I tell you two truths and a lie? The 2020 election results were certified in all 50 states. Over 60 lawsuits challenged the election of 2020, and all of them lost. A YouTube video filmed from a truck overturns the 2020 election. Which one is a lie? Which ones are the truth? I hope you can get that one. Fill in the blank here, okay? Kind of like a little game here. The 2020 election was decided by blank. The main source of reliable history is blank. Now, if you didn't say voters or the Electoral College for number one, you're wrong. It's not lizard people. It's not the Illuminati. It's not anything else. It's just people in Electoral College, which is a weird system, but it's a system we have. And the second one, of course, historians, people who follow history, write about history, study history. We don't always get it right, but we attempt to, and we changed history when it needs to be changed, when more facts have come out. It's not random memes. It's not some guy in the back of a truck again. It's not Jimmy down at the old Bass Pro Shop, okay? It's people whose whole job it is to look, review, and write. Think about the game Mad Libs, if you've ever done that, okay? When we talk about Mad Libs, you try to figure out something funny to put in this space, okay? When people talk about elections, they say, well, democracy was replaced by on that year. And, some people say lizard people, Illuminati, the Democrats, liberals, Soros, all these people, okay? People used to think Twitter was a cause of it. Now Twitter's not the cause of it. Twitter's the cause of the 2024 election being this way. Oklahoma is the first, right? It's the first one to do it officially. And I think that's the big word we need to use, is officially. Other schools teach critical thinking. They teach it with certain aspects of not just the election, but of other avenues that, we look at. Just because other schools don't make it official does not mean teachers aren't teaching it. I am not a liberal. I'm pretty right-wing, but I'm not right-wing enough to teach history that isn't true. Now, when we look back through time, our time right now is not new. It's not different. We had, again, the communists do it. We had the Germans do it. The Japanese do it. We had the Chinese do it. Europe has done it many times. We've done it. Civil War, after the Civil War, the South didn't want to acknowledge the problems that led to the war. So they just didn't teach about it. The North, we taught about how evil the South was without teaching about what we were doing and how really Lincoln got elected. And the reason he got elected was, he was not running on, I'm going to free the slaves. He wanted to keep status quo because he knew slavery would die out on its own over time. He saw the writing on the wall. The South seceded because they were expecting Lincoln to get rid of it. The Emancipation Proclamation did not happen before the Civil War. It happened during, and it wasn't to free the slaves of the North. It was to free the slaves of the South, of the country, of the states/southern country that had seceded. It had nothing to do with the slaves up here, but people forget that. And really, even though they were free, it took a lot of time and effort and grace by everybody on both sides to get people to live that way. Because though movies show it and people talk about how evil it was, and people talk about how evil slave owners were, and people talk about how the South is, they were all evil people. I'm going to say this again, like I've said before. Most people in the South, even if they owned slaves, they were not like the movies depict. Okay, there were horrible people. They were horrible people who did horrible things to other people because they felt like they were better than. But some of them used them as just farm workers, and they treated them as close to right as you can. There were slaves who lived inside. There were slaves who worked outside. There were slaves who worked for a certain amount of time, and their owners set them free and sent them north to be free. But even in the North, they weren't treated respectfully as much as we make ourselves think. Slaves who moved to the North, or African Americans who lived in the North during that time, between 1850 and 1900, even 19 to 1920, they were not given the amount of respect that we show on television and in the movies. We in the North did not treat them a lot better. The big thing is we called them indentured servants instead of slaves. We just changed the words. We still owned them. We still paid them less. We still treated them like garbage. But we don't teach that. I didn't learn about the Japanese internment camps that we put Japanese or Asian Americans who looked Japanese in during World War II because my history books didn't show it. I had a history teacher in high school who said, hey, this actually happened. But if he didn't tell me, it wasn't in our books. He told us. And that's the difference. He told us the truth and made us find out on our, he said, if you don't trust me or you don't believe me, look it up in another book, not in your textbook. Back then it was check an encyclopedia or go to the library because history isn't pretty, okay? Stalin wasn't good. Karl Marx, not a good guy. Mao, not a good guy. We had a lot of people around this world, Hitler, Mussolini, not great guys. And the thing they all wanted to do is what Oklahoma's kind of doing now. They told us all that they were changing their books to help their people think better. Okay? We just give it better titles now of critical thinking and expanding their horizons or making them have an open mind. There's certain things you can't have an open mind about. 9/11 happened. Pearl Harbor happened. The atrocities at Auschwitz and other concentration camps happened. America had slaves. We fought over it. America, still to this day, we're not perfect. We're not the shining light on the hill. Okay? We're not the shining city above. We're just a country doing what we can do. We treated women like crap. It's getting better. We treated them like crap. We didn't give them the right to vote for 150 years. We treated African Americans, Asian Americans, Asians, Africans, Hispanics, Italians, Irish, everybody at some time in this country basically has been treated like garbage. If you looked different, if you sounded different, if you ate different food, if you just had different color hair, you were treated weirdly. And that's history. And that's how we learn. We learn what we've done and we figure out, okay, what worked, what was good, what was bad. And then we change it and change our mindsets. We don't take something that happened and say later, well, no, it didn't. Okay? The moon landing happened. We went into space. The Earth is not flat. Donald Trump lost in 2020. Al Gore lost in 2000. Bill Clinton did have sexual relations with that woman. He also inhaled. George Bush II most likely invaded Iraq because they went after his dad. They did not have weapons of mass destruction. The Afghan people don't know how to not be at war with each other, at least over the last 6,000 years. Russia is a scary place. The Ukraine war with Russia is happening, and it's ugly, and the people who in power are the reason it's happening. The people don't want to kill each other. The few people in charge don't care about those people. England, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany, they all talk about how horrible we are as America. But we have saved them, bailed them out, and fixed their governments numerous times. We talk about saving the world. We talk about making the world a better place. But if you look at our history, we only do it when there's money to be made, or allies, or weapons to be made or gained. That's what we do. We take what we've seen in the past and we tweak it. George Washington didn't want to be king because he knew kings were coming to an end. Abe Lincoln didn't want to free the slaves officially because he knew it was going to come to an end either way. The South didn't want to wait for that. They decided, let's go to war instead. They really didn't want to. They seceded and then war happened, but semantics. Archduke Ferdinand, if he would have not gotten lost, World War I would have still happened, but maybe later, and it might have turned out differently. Germany was not a big fan of what Japan did with Pearl Harbor, because Germany was okay with what America was doing, which was helping-ish the Europeans. Everything in history changes just a little. But we can't just rewrite it. The events of 2020 and 2000, in 1945, in 1930, in 1920, in 1865, all the way back to when history was first written, has happened. You might have semantics. You might say, well, no, this isn't what really happened. It was this instead of this. But history can't just disappear. You don't always have to agree with it, but it's there. Thank you for watching. Class dismissed.